Out on the American frontier, survival wasn't a given. It was earned with blood, grit, and the right weapon in your hands. Frontiersmen, hunters, gunslingers, bounty hunters, and warriors didn't just carry arms. They carried lifelines. And every weapon told a story. Some of these tools became legends. Others were too brutal, too unwieldy, or too ahead of their time to last. But each one left its mark. One shot, one cut, one brutal moment at a time. Strap in, because out here, the only law that matters is the one you can enforce yourself. Number 10, Tomahawk. If one weapon captured the raw, ruthless essence of frontier survival, it was the tomahawk. This wasn't some decorative hatchet to hang over the hearth. No, this was a blade for men who didn't flinch at blood. Lightweight, lethal, and endlessly versatile, the tomahawk was part utility tool, part battlefield menace, and entirely essential. Originally crafted by the Algonquian tribes, the earliest tomahawks were shaped from flint, antler, or stone, sharpened by hand and lashed to a wooden shaft with rawhide. But that was just the beginning. Once iron and steel arrived through European trade, the tomahawk evolved into a new breed of weapon, harder, sharper, deadlier. It took cues from the Royal Navy's boarding axes, short, brutal implements used to hack through men and bulkheads alike. Now it had an edge that didn't chip, a handle that could be swung in a blur, and heft that made sure when it landed, it stayed landed. But it wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol. The tomahawk passed from hand to hand, between tribes, between soldiers, between killers and survivors. By the 1700s, even colonial troops like Rogers' Rangers carried them into the brush, trusting the blade more than a musket in close quarters. Then there was the pipe tomahawk, half peace offering, half death sentence. One end carved for smoking tobacco in treaty circles, the other forged to split skulls when those treaties broke. Diplomacy and violence fused into a single shaft. It was more than practical. It was prophetic. You could chop wood, breach doors, crack bone. Some came with spikes or hammers on the reverse, giving them even more use in battle or the field. And because it was light, you never had to think twice about packing it. It rode your belt every mile. Native warriors wielded it in raids. Settlers used it to survive the harsh days and harsher nights. Militias and mercenaries carried it from Virginia's backwoods to the heart of French territory. Wherever blood was spilled, the tomahawk was nearby, carried by men who fought without rules and survived without mercy. It wasn't just the weapon of the frontier, it was the frontier. Fast, unforgiving, and always close enough to kill. Next came firepower, the kind that could stop a beast or a man dead in their tracks. The mountains had their own rules, and if you didn't bring enough gun, you didn't come back. Enter the Hawken Rifle, frontier-made, frontier-tested, and frontier-feared. This was no polished European musket. This was a grizzly stopper, a buffalo breaker. A rifle built not just to kill, but to dominate. Born in a St. Louis workshop in 1815, the Hawken was the brainchild of Jacob and Samuel Hawken, gunsmith brothers who didn't believe in finesse. They built rifles for mountain men, for trappers, for scouts who slept in bear dens and drank from snowmelt. These rifles were heavy, yes, but they hit like thunder. The earliest Hawken rifles came with barrels 42 inches long, firing .54 or even .68 caliber lead balls, giant hunks of metal that could drop a charging elk or crack through timber. The kind of stopping power that gave you a fighting chance in a place that didn't offer second chances. It didn't take long before the legends came calling. Hugh Glass, torn apart by a grizzly and left for dead, had a Hawken. Kit Carson, scout and soldier, swore by it. Jim Bridger carried one into the Rockies and back. These weren't just men. They were myths in the making, and the Hawken rifle was the iron in their shadow. Unlike mass-produced weapons later in the century, each Hawken was handcrafted, individually tuned by a small crew that turned out fewer than 100 rifles a year. That scarcity added to the mystique. If you had one, it meant something. It meant you'd made it to the edge of the map and planned to go farther. By the time Theodore Roosevelt was hunting in the Badlands, he too picked up a Hawken. Because even in a changing world, some tools never lost their edge. It wasn't fast, it wasn't fancy. But when you pulled the trigger, it made a statement. Out here, where danger didn't knock, it roared. The Hawken rifle didn't flinch, it answered. Number 8, Springfield Trapdoor Rifle. They called it the needle gun, but there was nothing delicate about it. Born from battlefield necessity, the Springfield Trapdoor rifle was a weapon forged in transition, from the slow-loading muskets of the Civil War to the breech-loading firepower the frontier demanded. In 1865, with war still echoing across the country, the U.S. Army had a stockpile of outdated muzzle loaders and a desperate need to modernize. The answer? Convert them. Engineers took those old rifles, cut them open, and added a hinged breech block that snapped shut like a trapdoor. With that, the Springfield Trapdoor was born. It fired a hefty .50 to 70 centerfire cartridge, big enough to stop a man or a horse, and it did so faster than anything the Army had before. Suddenly, a trained soldier could fire 8, even 15 rounds a minute if his nerves held steady. That speed mattered, especially in places like the Bozeman Trail, where small outposts found themselves surrounded by hundreds of Lakota warriors. In 1867, at the hayfield and wagon box fights, fewer than 100 men held off, wave after wave of attack, reloading faster, shooting straighter. The Springfield Trapdoor didn't just save lives, it changed the balance of power. By 1873, the rifle became the Army's standard issue, available in full-length infantry models and shorter cavalry carbines. General Alfred Terry oversaw the brutal trials that proved its mettle. Competing against over 100 rival weapons, the Springfield didn't win with flash. It won with reliability. Hunters noticed too. Buffalo Bill Cody wielded his own conversion, nicknaming it Lucretia Borgia, after the infamous femme fatale. With it, he dropped hundreds of bison to feed rail workers across the plains. The Trapdoor had flaws, slow compared to repeaters, clunky to reload under fire, but it didn't jam. And in a place where one misfire could mean death, that counted for everything. The Springfield Trapdoor was the bridge between eras, one foot in the smoke-choked trenches of Civil War, the other in the open, brutal expanse of the West. Number 7, Winchester lever-action repeating rifle. It didn't just win the West, it armed it. The Winchester repeating rifle wasn't the first of its kind, but it was the first that worked so well for so many in so many brutal places. From dusty cattle trails to boomtown saloons, this lever-action legend became the great equalizer. Introduced in 1873, the Winchester model, 1873, was compact, rugged, and chambered in calibers like .44-40, the same rounds used in Colt revolvers. That wasn't a coincidence. Cowboys, marshals, and outlaws alike loved the convenience. One box of ammo for both sidearm and rifle. It slid into a saddle scabbard like it belonged there. Could be fired from horseback, cleaned on the fly, and if need be, reloaded in seconds. In a land where split seconds decided life or death, the Winchester made those seconds count. Lawmen like Pat Garrett rode with one, outlaws like Butch Cassidy and Billy the Kid shot back with theirs, and Texas Rangers swore by it when facing down Comanches, desperados, or angry mobs. But this rifle wasn't done evolving. In 1876, Winchester dropped the Model 1876, a beefier version designed for true rifle cartridges. Now, it wasn't just a rancher's companion. It was a hunter's hammer. Theodore Roosevelt carried one, custom engraved on his early expeditions. Native leaders like Geronimo were found with them in hand. Whether you wore a badge or carried a bounty, the Winchester made sure you were heard. 4 variants served every need: the carbine for tight quarters, the express for faster handling, the sporting rifle for long-range work, and the musket for the few who wore uniforms. More than any other rifle, the Winchester captured the frontier's DNA: fast, fierce, and ready for a fight. And as the sun dipped low over the prairie, one thing was certain. If you heard a lever slam in a round chamber, you knew trouble had just arrived. Number 6, Sharp's rifle. If the frontier had a sniper rifle, this was it. The Sharp's rifle wasn't about speed, it was about certainty. One shot, clean, devastating, final. In the right hands, it could drop a buffalo at 800 yards or punch through a man's chest before he heard the crack. Invented by Christian Sharps in 1848, this single-shot falling block rifle earned a place in legend, not for how many rounds it fired, but for how reliably it killed. It was precise. It was powerful. And in the hands of the right shooter, it was unstoppable. By the 1870s, the Sharps had evolved to fire massive metallic cartridges. The .5090, the .45120, the kind of slugs that didn't just wound, they erased. These were rounds meant not for skirmishes, but for killing in one go, through thick hides, heavy bones, and layers of muscle. Buffalo hunters loved it. With a steady rest and a trained eye, they could drop herd after herd, feeding the railroads and trading posts that clawed their way west. These men, grim, patient, and ruthless, relied on the Sharps not just for profit, but for survival. It earned a nickname, Old Reliable, and it lived up to it. In an age where reloading could be fumbled, mechanisms jammed or parts rusted, the Sharps just worked. Its falling block action was brutally simple and brutally effective, engineered to function flawlessly under the worst conditions: dust, blood, mud, or rain. Creedmoor matches proved what hunters already knew. It could shoot straight beyond belief. At 1,000 yards, the Sharps could still punch holes in targets with deadly accuracy. It wasn't just about raw power, it was about precision, trust, and control in a world where everything else was chaos. At the Battle of Adobe Walls in 1874, a small band of buffalo hunters used Sharps rifles to hold off hundreds of Comanche and Kiowa warriors, hitting targets from half a mile away. One shot, one enemy down, again and again. It wasn't just a hunting rifle. It was a fortress in your hands. It didn't ask for speed. It demanded patience and delivered finality. And when the smoke cleared and the echo faded, you were either alive or you weren't. That was the truth the Sharps delivered, one deadly trigger pull at a time. Next comes the unsung workhorse. A rifle so durable, it was trusted from the plains of America to the battlefields of Europe. Number 5, Remington Rolling Block Rifle. Simple, rugged, indestructible. The Remington rolling block wasn't built to impress, it was built to survive. In a land where weapons jammed, fouled, and misfired in the worst possible moments, this rifle became a frontier legend simply because it refused to quit. First introduced in the 1860s, the rolling block earned its name from its brilliantly simple design. A single hammer, a rotating breech block, one shot at a time. Pull back the hammer, roll the block, load the cartridge, and fire. That's it. No gears, no gimmicks, just steel and purpose. Buffalo hunters swore by it. When you're staring down a 1,000-pound beast and there's no backup, you need a rifle that'll fire every single time. The Remington did. And not just in the wilds of the American West. It saw action around the globe. Armies in Europe, South America, and even Africa ordered thousands of these rifles for one reason: they worked. In a harsh world with no room for error, that reliability mattered. The rolling block could take punishment: dust, rain, blood, heat, and time. While other rifles needed gentle hands and careful maintenance, this one thrived on neglect. It didn't just survive battlefields and buffalo ranges, it competed on the world stage. In 1874, the American rifle team squared off against Ireland at the Creedmoor Rifle Range in New York. It was a showdown of national pride, precision shooting, and long-range skill. Half the U.S. team carried Remington rolling block Creedmoor rifles, the others with Sharps. Against all odds and under enormous pressure, the Americans emerged victorious. It wasn't just a win for the shooters, it was a win for American engineering, proving the rolling block could go shot for shot with the very best. Creedmoor sharpshooters knew its value. It may not have had the Sharps' theatrical flair, but it had guts, grit, and unshakable endurance. And it earned its place in the history books, not just by killing, but by consistently delivering. It was a favorite of settlers, soldiers, ranchers, and lawmen. Not flashy, not fast, but it did its job. And on the frontier, that's all that mattered. Because sometimes one shot was all you got. But when one shot wasn't enough, when the crowd surged or the enemy rushed, you needed something louder, meaner, and twice as fast. That's where we're headed next. Number 4, double-barreled shotgun. If the rifle was the frontier's scalpel, the double-barreled shotgun was its sledgehammer. No other weapon delivered raw, immediate power like this beast. It didn't matter if it was an outlaw at 10 paces or a charging grizzly. pull both triggers, and the problem disappeared in a thunderclap of smoke and shot. Cheap, brutal, and easy to use. The double-barrel shotgun became the everyman's weapon on the American frontier. Pioneers, express riders, sheriffs, bounty hunters, everyone respected the iron thunder of those twin barrels. Whether it was a cap-lock muzzleloader or a breech-loading hammer gun, firing brass shells, the mechanics were simple and deadly. Load one round in each chamber, pull one trigger, pull the other, or both. At close range, it didn't need precision. It just needed nerve. You didn't aim a shotgun, you pointed it. And when you did, people listened. The mere sight of those dark twin barrels often cooled tempers faster than any badge or sermon. But when it didn't, the blast spoke louder than words. Settlers used it to hunt game, scare off raiders, or stop midnight intruders dead in their tracks. Lawmen called it the crowd tamer. And when angry mobs formed or drunken cowhands turned violent, it was the double barrel, not the revolver, that restored order. Buckshot tore through flesh and bone. Slugs crushed ribs and shattered limbs. The recoil, bone rattling. The damage, catastrophic, but perhaps its greatest virtue was reliability. No jams, no misfeats. Break it open, check the load, snap it shut, and you were ready to deal with whatever hell was coming over the hill. In the harshest, bloodiest corners of the frontier, this wasn't just a tool. It was peace of mind. A loud, brutal promise that if things went south, you'd go down shooting. And for fights too close for comfort, nothing hit harder. But sometimes steel spoke quieter and deadlier. Next up, a weapon that cut its way into legend. Number 3, Bowie Knife. Some weapons roared, others whispered. The Bowie Knife did both. On the American frontier, it wasn't just a tool. It was a statement. A glint of steel at your belt. A silent warning. A promise of what would happen if someone stepped too close. Named after James Bowie, whose legendary knife fight on a Mississippi sandbar in 1827 turned him into a national myth. The blade soon became the symbol of rough justice in the wilderness. The details of that duel were murky. Some say Bowie was already wounded when he gutted his opponent, but the legend was loud and it stuck. But what exactly was a Bowie knife? It varied. Some had long clip-point blades, others straight edges thick as your thumb. The most infamous designs could skin a deer, split a log, or take a man's life in one brutal stroke. It was part survival blade, part short sword, and entirely deadly. Bladesmiths across Arkansas, Tennessee, and the Deep South forged their own versions, each with minor twists. Some carried a crossguard, others were stripped down to pure edge and purpose. But all had one thing in common. They were made to be used. Hunters used them to clean game. Trappers used them to clear brush. Gamblers used them to even the odds when a card game went south. And when revolvers jammed or ran dry, it was the Bowie that settled things. As firearms became cheaper and more common, the Bowie knife shrank, morphing into the hunting and camping blades we see today. But in its prime, it was a weapon of last resort, a frontier law of blood and survival. It didn't just kill. It warned, it promised. And when that promise was kept, it left scars that ran deeper than skin. But steel wasn't the only silent killer. Sometimes the most dangerous weapons didn't even use powder or blade. And that brings us to the most surprising killer of all. Number 2, long rifle. Forget the thunderous booms of muskets and the clouds of black powder smoke choking the battlefield. The long rifle brought a different kind of death, cold, precise, and delivered from the shadows. Known by many names, the Pennsylvania rifle, the Kentucky rifle, or simply the American long rifle, this weapon was born in the hands of German gunsmiths in the early 1700s. They gave it a long barrel, often over 4 feet, and rifled grooves inside the bore. This wasn't for show. That rifling gave each shot a deadly spin, transforming lead balls into long-range threats. Frontiersmen didn't fight like European soldiers. There were no neat lines or orderly volleys. There were trees, ridges, rocks, and silence, until the shot rang out. With a musket, you were lucky to hit a man at 50 yards. With a long rifle, a skilled shooter could drop a target at 200 yards or more. And when every shot counted, that precision meant everything. It wasn't just a hunter's tool. It was a symbol of survival. Every deer it brought down meant food. Every redcoat it felled meant one less enemy. In the right hands, it turned farmers into snipers, trappers into ghosts. This rifle shaped American warfare from the French and Indian War to the Revolution, the War of 1812, and beyond. It was the weapon of choice for scouts, rangers, and backwoods militia, and its influence echoed forward into weapons like the Hawken Rifle, a shorter, punchier cousin built for mountain men. But it wasn't perfect. The tight-fitting ball was hard to ram down the barrel, especially after a few shots fouled it with powder residue. Reloading took time, patience, a calm hand. But the reward? A shot that whispered death across a quarter mile. In a land without mercy, where survival demanded silence and skill, the long rifle reigned. But what if you didn't need powder at all? What if you could kill without smoke, without sound? That's the story of our final weapon, an engineering miracle almost too strange to believe. Number 1, Girardoni Air Rifle. No smoke, no bang, no warning. On a frontier ruled by black powder and noise, the Girardoni Air Rifle was a ghost. Designed in the late 1700s by Italian gunsmith Bartolomeo Girardoni, this .46 caliber weapon didn't rely on gunpowder. It fired using compressed air. That meant no flash, no roar, no cloud of smoke giving away your position. It looked like a musket, but inside that walnut stock, a hidden reservoir filled with enough air to fire 20 to 30 rounds before losing power. With a flick of a lever, a lead ball dropped into place, ready to fire again, and again, and again. Compared to the slow, clumsy reloads of traditional muskets, it was otherworldly. A shooter could stay low, keep quiet, and unleash a steady stream of silent death. Too good to be true? Almost. Its biggest flaw was pressure. Air tanks had to be pumped by hand dozens of times, or refilled from heavy air reservoirs. That made field use tricky. On battlefields where powder was plentiful, it never gained wide military traction. But on the American frontier, it found a strange and deadly niche. When Meriwether Lewis led the famed Lewis and Clark expedition across the uncharted West, he carried a Girardoni. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a show of force. In diplomatic meetings with native tribes, Lewis would fire a rapid volley from the strange silent gun. No smoke, no powder, just thuds of lead hitting the mark. To those who watched, it looked like magic. Some called it great medicine. Others didn't have a word for it. But the message was clear. These men had power unlike anything they'd seen. Even today, the Girardoni feels like something from another world. An air-powered repeater that could kill silently in a time when everything else exploded with noise. It didn't shape the frontier with volume, but with precision. It was death by surprise. And that surprise, that was often all the edge you needed. These were the deadliest weapons of the American frontier. Some became icons, others were forgotten. But every one of them carved fear, fire, and blood into the story of the Wild West. So which one would you trust when the sun dipped low and death came calling? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the edge of history.